You hear them before you see them. The sound travels across the water first. Low, rhythmic. The beating of 10,000 oars against the sea. Then the ships appear on the horizon. Hundreds of them. Their white sails catching the morning light. Like the wings of something that has come to end you.
You have been waiting for this moment for 3 years. And now, it is here.
You are a merchant of Carthage. You have a home on a hill above the harbor.
From your rooftop, on clear days, you can see the entire city spread out below you but full. The great circular harbor.
The great circular harbor where your ships come and go, loaded with silver and ivory and dyed cloth.
The tall white temples on the hill behind you. The markets that never seem to close. The streets packed with traders speaking a dozen different languages. Carthage is the heart of the Mediterranean world.
Carthage is the heart of the Mediterranean world. A city of 500,000 people.
The wealthiest port in the ancient world. A place so full of life it seems impossible that it could ever simply cease to exist.
But Rome has decided that it must. It started long before the ships.
It started with words. A Roman senator named Cato. Carthage must be destroyed.
He said it so many times, so loudly, so relentlessly, that eventually Rome started to believe him.
Not because Carthage was a real threat anymore. The great general Hannibal was long dead.
Carthage had no meaningful army, no aggressive ambitions. It was a city of traders, not warriors.
But it was rich, it was proud, and it was still there, still thriving, 60 years after that offended Rome in a way that was difficult to explain, and very easy to act on. 3 years ago, Roman ambassadors arrived with terms. 408. Carthage agreed to every single one. Carthage agreed to every single one. They handed over thousands of weapons, hundreds of war machines. They did everything Rome asked. Then, Rome gave them the final condition. Abandon the city. Move 10 miles inland. Away from the sea. Away from the harbor. Away from everything that made Carthage what it was. And Carthage said no. Not because it was arrogant. Not because it was foolish. Because you cannot ask a sailor to leave the sea. You cannot ask a city built on trade to walk away from its port and simply start again in the dust.
Carthage said no because the alternative was not life. It was just a slower kind of death.
And so the siege began. The first months were almost manageable.
The walls were enormous, triple layered in places, stretching for 20 miles around the city and the harbor. Carthage had survived sieges before. People told each other it would be fine. Rome would tire. Rome would negotiate. Rome always eventually made a deal. Inside the city, something extraordinary happened. Carthage built a new army from nothing. Citizens who had never held a weapon picked up tools and learned to use them.
Women cut off their own hair to be used as rope for the catapults.
The city's craftsmen worked through the night, every night, building swords and shields from whatever metal they could find.
Jewelry was melted down. Door hinges were stripped from walls. Cooking pots became armor. A city deciding that it would not go quietly. But the second year was harder. The Roman blockade tightened. Ships stopped getting through. The markets emptied. The food you had stored in the early months began to run out. Merchants who once argued over the price of silk were now arguing over a handful of grain. The smell of the city changed. The spice and salt replaced by something old. You gave your sons smaller portions and told them it was fine. They were old enough to know it wasn't.
Your wife's eyes, once full of warmth, became careful, watching, calculating.
You all slept in the same room by the end of the second year ban. Not for warmth, but because being close to each other.
By the third year, hope had become a luxury that most people could no longer afford.
You heard the stories coming back from the walls. Rome had a new general now. Young, ambitious, ferociously capable.
He had rebuilt Roman discipline from the inside out. And he had cut off Carthage completely to safe.
Blocked the harbor entrance with a barrier of stone and rubble, constructed a fortified line around the entire landward side of the city.
Just waiting. Rome could afford to wait. Carthage could not.
The harbour, your harbour, the harbour you watched from your rooftop as a child, counting the ships, was sealed.
Carthage responded with something that astonished even the Romans watching from outside. In secret, the city dug a new channel.
A new outlet to the sea, hidden, narrow, dug through the city's own land, with nothing but desperation and the absolute refusal to die without a fight.
When the new channel opened, and Carthage's freshly built ships sailed out through it, the Romans simply stared.
But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Too few ships, too little food, too little time.
Scipio sent his men across the sealed harbor mouth at low tide, under cover of darkness, and they took the commercial harbor before anyone inside was fully awake.
By the time the alarm spread through the city, Roman soldiers were already inside the gates.
And then the street fighting began. This is the part the history books summarize in a sentence or two.
But you were there. You know what it actually sounded like. What it smelled like. The streets of Carthage were narrow and dense, buildings 6 and 7 stories tall, packed.
The Romans had to fight for every single floor of every single building. Up the stairs, room by room.
When they couldn't clear a building, they tore it down from above and moved across the rubble to the next one.
6 days. For 6 days.
For 6 days, the city was taken apart from the inside out. You ran with your family through smoke so thick you could barely see your own hands.
You passed things you tried to forget immediately. People who hadn't moved quickly enough.
Fires that had started in buildings above and were now spreading horizontally, jumping across the narrow alleyways.
The sound of stone falling, the sound of doors breaking, the sound of a city being disassembled.
You made it to the citadel. Thousands did. The hill of Byrsa. The last Carthaginian commander, a man named Hasdrubal, surrendered there, threw himself at Scipio's feet.
She knew how her story ended. A story of defiance.
The fighting stopped. And then something worse than fighting began.
Silence. The kind of silence that is not peaceful. The silence of a city where every conversation has been cut off in the middle of a sentence.
The silence after 500,000 voices have stopped. Rome did not simply occupy Carthage, it erased it.
For 17 days, soldiers moved through the ruins with systematic purpose, pulling down whatever still stood. The walls, the temples, the great harbor, the libraries, everything. The story that Rome salted the earth to stop anything from growing is probably a myth. But what they actually did was
was real enough.
They leveled the city so completely that future generations would debate where exactly Carthage had been. 50,000 survivors were sold into slavery. The rest did not survive at all.
The land was declared cursed. For years, nobody built there.
The greatest trading city in the ancient world, reduced to a boundary marker and a memory. But here is the thing that stays with you. The thing that makes Carthage different from most disasters in history. Carthage was not destroyed by a volcano. It was not hit by an earthquake. It was not swept away by a flood.
It was dismantled by other people, by a decision, by a senator who kept saying the same 5 words until enough people believed him.
Carthage was destroyed by politics, by the calculated decision that a city should not exist.
And when historians later asked why Rome had done it, the honest answer was something like, because we could. Because Carthage was wealthy and we resented it. Because destroying it sent a message to every other city watching from across the sea.
The message was simple. No one is too rich to be erased.
More than 2,000 years later, archaeologists digging in modern-day Tunisia found traces of the city beneath the soil.
Fragments of pottery, remnants of the harbor.
The faint outline of streets under the earth. And in some places, evidence of children.
The controversial ancient burial ground. That became the subject of fierce historical debate.
Carthage left almost nothing behind. Rome made sure of that.
But the harbor is still there, partly. Filled in and silent and ringed by modern suburbs now.
You can stand at its edge and look at the water and understand that this was once the busiest port in the world.
That ships came and went from here for centuries, carrying the wealth of continents.
That 500,000 people woke up here every morning and made their coffee and argued about prices and loved their children.
And that one day, someone would listen.
Someone listened.
But Carthage wasn't the only empire that fell in a single night. Across the ancient world, another civilization.
Across the ancient world, another civilization, older than Rome, older than Carthage, powerful beyond measure.
No siege, no warning, just darkness and fire and silence by morning.
That story is next, coming soon.
That story is next. A new history begins.